it's utter insanity to me that has become a matter of public controversy. And this is why I say that when people in their communities see the problem, there should be broad-scale agreement. But you do have a cadre of people who live in a lot of these cities, and I will say in blue cities particularly with crime, who are not affected by crime because they're not living where you live. Which you live in a fine, I mean, where you live, I know that area well. It's where I lived most of my life. It's a fine area, but it's not up in the hills, right? I mean, it's not up in Malibu. And it's not at Barbara Streisand's estate where she's got armed guards outside. And so those people who are really spending a lot of money and making policy and deciding on no cash bail and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And we can't, it's an aspect of freedom. We have to have the ACLU suit to make sure that the police are not allowed to remove people's stuff from the street because it's an aspect of freedom to be sleeping on the street. And the fact that those people are so disconnected from the concerns of everyday life that it becomes a sin for you to mention the consequences of their policy is so dangerous because how else are you going to adjudicate whether the policy is good or bad if you can't talk about the consequences of the policy?
Well, let me give you another example. This happened recently, and I was really happy to see it because it's important for these groups to speak out about what they're experiencing in California. So members of the NAACP in the Bay Area, and we're talking about the NAACP, they're starting to speak out because they don't feel safe. They don't want their children to walk past, people smoking meth, injecting whatever, taking, fentanyl and all that. They want the city to be a lot more.
It's not just the NAACP. No parent, black, green, blue, white, brown, orange, whatever you say, okay? No parent would want their kids walking past people that are injecting themselves with heroin, meth, smoking weed, doing drugs, doing all kinds of things. But unfortunately, that's what's happening. And it's predominantly happening in, as Ben said, blue areas, blue districts run by Democrats and liberals and progressives for a long time. And they don't live in those areas.
Proactive in doing something about this because they feel that the communities that are overwhelmingly impacted by this happen to be poor minority communities.
Bingo.
And that is true. So you can't on one hand pretend like you care about these communities, you care about equity, you care about all of this, when the policies that you are promoting and advocating for are making it incredibly difficult for their children to grow up in safe neighborhoods, clean neighborhoods. I mean, we're spending in California billions of dollars every year on making the problems worse. Our schools need more funding. I mean, it is insane. What we're seeing right now is insane. I don't care if anyone gets mad at me for saying these things. If you're not living it, if you're not experiencing it, if you're not seeing it, and if you've chosen to ignore members of the NAACP on this issue, then maybe you need to, reevaluate what your values are.
And one of the things that's happened also with regard to the crime issue in Los Angeles, which again was a significant moving factor in my family leaving the state, was the attempt by politicians and the media to pretend away the problem. It really is a serious issue. And there have been reports, Los Angeles Times reported on this, about the police actively downgrading the level of crimes when they report them. So what used to be a felony is now considered a misdemeanor. What's considered a misdemeanor is no longer considered a crime.
This will blow your mind. In California, domestic violence, for instance, is not considered a felony. And I'm talking about domestic violence, including strangulation, is not considered a felony right now.
Anna, who do you have to thank for that? Maybe it's not you, but there's certainly progressives on your side of the aisle that would basically side with that. Definitely the Democrats, definitely the liberals, definitely the social justice warriors, definitely those elitists that don't even live in those areas that are basically virtue signaling. They're the ones whose policies, they're the ones that are putting the policies in place that allow this crap to occur, these crimes to occur.
Child trafficking in California, believe it or not, has been downgraded to a misdemeanor. How does that make any sense? And so a lot of the voters, I think, had the best of intentions. I was one of those voters where I voted for propositions in California that I felt were needed to essentially reform our criminal justice system because mass incarceration is a problem. There are all sorts of issues.
Mass incarceration, it's not a freaking problem. It's only a problem to you liberals and you leftists and you progressives. Somebody commits a crime, they do the goddamn time.
In our criminal justice system that need reform. But at the same time, I had no idea that when it came to, let's say, cashless bail or things like that, they were going to downgrade certain felonies to misdemeanors. I had no idea, right?
Happen?
So when that's part of the equation, I think it's important for voters to be fully informed on that so they're not surprised later. You get what I'm saying?
For sure.
Violent crime is violent crime.
Do you think people are going to wake up to this? And if so, how does that incentive structure work? So California is essentially a one-party state. Los Angeles is essentially a one-party city. Even if you're a Republican like Rick Caruso, you have to run like a Democrat in order to even get a share of the vote. So what are the alternatives in cities like this? So, I mean, you're obviously someone who disagrees with a lot of your party on some of these issues, or at least the more radical wing of your party on some of these issues. You know, I've always considered myself a conservative, not a Republican. So there are situations where I've said I'm not voting for this candidate because this person does not meet with sort of my minimum standards for who should hold office, or this person is somebody who I did vote for, but now I'm unhappy with them. So how malleable are you with, for example, how you vote in a local election or even a national election?
Well, I mean, I don't know if malleable is the right word. I was very unhappy with local elections in 2022. Didn't feel like there were really a lot of good options. So that was depressing. And you're right in that California has become so blue that like any idea that challenges what the Democratic Party believes there is immediately disregarded. And I think that that's a shame, because even if I disagree with that point of view, I think it's important to have the debate, right? So I actually really enjoyed watching Karen Bass debate Rick Caruso. I thought that it actually forced her to acknowledge some of the weaknesses in her policy proposals and her ideas. And I don't know, I mean, I'm seeing her make some moves that I like. So hopefully she continues in that direction and she improves LA. I'll wait and see what happens before I really give my full judgment on that.
It's not going to happen.
I think the most important thing to do is for media figures to start having their viewers feel comfortable having conversations with people they disagree with, really, because they're not getting the full perspective. If they're relying on left media, they're getting one perspective and they're not hearing from the other side at all. And when they do hear from the other side, they're hearing from the extremes, saying insane, lunatic stuff, and they think that that's representative of everyone on the right. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
We'll get to more on that in just 1 second. First, Let's go back to national politics for a second, since we've done our bit on local politics. We mostly cover national politics. So, when you look at the current state of the parties, it looks like the Democrats are in a state of strength. Obviously, the Republican Party has been in a significant state of disarray for quite a while.
It's funny you say that.
I was about to say, I think that that's actually masking a lot of divisions underneath the surface in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
I think the Democratic Party has sort of an eggshell skull. I think right now, because the Republican Party decided to raid the local homeless shelter for their candidates, the Democrats have been shielded from the consequences of their own bad issue choice and some fairly bad candidates of their own, ranging from people who literally had strokes in the middle of the campaign to a president who does not seem capable of carrying out his office. I'm going to ask you to diagnose the Republican Party in a second and which direction you think that Republican Party is going to go. And then we can get into where we really disagree, because we've been doing too much agreeing so far. But if you're diagnosing the Democratic Party, what's the direction you think the Democratic Party needs to move? And can Joe Biden be the guy who leaves them there, or who else is there? Because that seems like kind of a thin bench.
Well, Ben, I think we're going to start disagreeing right away because I think the only winning direction for the Democratic Party is in the direction of FDR. And that's the reason why in the beginning of Biden's term, his team tried to paint him as like the new FDR. But I mean, he couldn't be further from the truth. I got to be honest, right? Like the good provisions within Build Back Better died. He didn't even fight for them. I don't even think he actually wanted those provisions to pass. I think it was all for show. Look, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to take care of Americans, make sure they're thriving, protect workers, protect consumers.
That's exactly the message of Donald Trump. But see, you don't want Donald Trump inside there because you're so ideologically bent that there's no way that you could support him for his messages that you have said before, that he spoke to that. He did do that. He did come back on. He did do on his promises. Now, there were a lot of things that he wasn't able to accomplish, but because of 4 years of under siege from the leftists and Democrats with Russia, Ukraine, all the other crap that they were throwing at him, all the lies and all the fabrications that were being made, he still managed to do a tremendous amount for the people. So when you basically say, we have to be like FDR, what are you talking about? The person was right there for 4 years, but you didn't want him because orange man bad.
Is my focus. I think people want to live in safe communities, clean communities. I don't think it makes you some crazy rabid right-winger to want that. I think everyone wants that and they need to be honest about it, right? So for Democrats, stop focusing on scaring people about the scary right-wing candidates and offer them real solutions that you're going to fight for. I think that's the only long-lasting winning strategy for Democrats. Are they going to do it? No, because they're captured by the money. There's too many. And you're right, what you said earlier about incentives and disincentives. That's the whole game, Ben, okay? Trying to decipher whether a politician is a good guy or a bad guy is nonsense. Are the incentives there to ensure that this elected official is actually going to be honest and work on behalf of his or her constituents? That's the real question. And right now...
And the only answer to that question is for both political parties, and you're going to hear it over and over again, at least from me, the only way to make sure that the incentive is there for the people that we elect to do the bidding of us, the people that put them there in the first place with our vote, is to have term limits. That's what you need, term limits. And my thing in term limits probably would be 2 terms as a senator, and probably I would say, I would start off with at least a minimum of 3 terms for a House of Representative. Presidency, 2 terms. And I would have something for judgeships too. I would not make them lifetime appointments. No way, no how. I would even be willing to discuss how long a term should be for federal judgeships and district court judge. The whole thing, put it out there. Term limits is the only way to disincentivize what's going on in the cesspool in Washington, D.C.
Now, I think all the incentives are in the wrong place.
So what's the number one policy you'd like to see the Democratic Party pursue? You're a legislator now. You've been elected president. What's your first initiative as president of the United States?
You couldn't do this unilaterally, but I think one of the main policies that would improve a lot of these other issues that we're talking about is healthcare. Single-payer healthcare, or at least, in the very least, in the short term, just reform healthcare to a point where everyone has the coverage they need to get the care they need. So the untreated mental illnesses that we're seeing on our streets right now, that is a byproduct of a broken healthcare system. I want to fix that. That would be, again, the number one thing I would focus on if I had the power to really make that change.
So, obviously, I think that...
I'm going to stop it right here and basically say that she had a choice. She decided to go healthcare. I think the first thing would have been job creation, economy. That's the first thing. That's how you lift all boats with the economy. She wanted to go with healthcare, single payer, same mantra that you hear all the single time from Democrats. Oh, it's a right. It's a human right. It's a constitutional right. You know what? Look, we have a safety net already. It's called the emergency room. It's out there. We've got places in California where they've got clinics upon clinic upon clinic where you can go and you can get your dosing, you can get your needles. They've got vans out there and trucks that are mobile in California and probably other places too, that their only job basically there is to help people inject themselves, get the needles, get the supplies, get the Band-Aids, get everything that they need so they can continue living in a life of what? Of disillusionment, a life fraught with drug uses for the rest of their life. Because if they continue to go on the drugs, they'll be mellowed out. They'll be out of sight, out of mind. That's the proposal that the Democrats have. And then you go back to single payer health care because that's it. Look at the VA. Look at the VA. That's single payer. And look at the even with the Things that President Trump did, getting rid of some of those people that were just absolutely criminally negligent. The employees at the VA, the government employees, trying to get rid of them was unbelievably hard, but they did it. And then try to put some policies in place. They did, but still, it's so inefficient. It's so inefficient. Yet, back to the same old policies that have never worked in the past because it sounds good to your group. Just preaching to the choir. Anyways, we appreciate you taking the time to watch, folks. This was part 4 of the Daily Wire debate between Ana Kasparian from the Young Turks and Ben Shapiro. And you've been watching the Dr. Nasser Sheikh Show. I've been your guest host. My name is Dr. Nasser. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Put your comments down below. Really like to know what your views are, what you thought of the reaction, what you thought of Anna's position or Ben's position. We'd really love you to share your thoughts. And I'll share my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. We'll see you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.